Hi guys, Jason here. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're a first time viewer, well, welcome. I've been modding a lot of Marshalls over the last year or so. 2203s, 2204s, DSLs, all kinds of stuff, right? Andrew, who is up in New South Wales, contacted me and said, look, I've got a JCM900, can you mod it? I said, no. You can't mod those, right? Solid state preamp, well, elements of solid state preamp, just forget about it. But I said to him, well, you could rebuild it. He said yes. I was like, oh no. All right, so we've done that, right? I've used one of these. This is my mini board. It's a mini PCB. It's set up to do a very simple 3 gain stage plus cathode follower Marshall style circuit. It's inspired definitely by the Friedman Junior kind of series, right? So you can build those, those kind of junior 18 watt, 20 watt EL84 amps with these things, but you can also do 6v6 builds, EL34s. It can do fixed bias and cathode bias. And there's a ton of relays on here. So this little board here can actually support a 3-channel amp. It can support kind of Plexi modes, gain stages in front of Plexis, diode clipping, all switchable, all by relays. And I have used one of these in here, right? So I've used these a bunch of times for scratch builds, but never to actually mod an amp. And it's been quite an interesting exercise, and it's come out great, right? It wasn't an easy build because you're working within the confines of an existing chassis and existing amp. But what I've done here is I've reused obviously the chassis, the transformers in the amp, and filter caps. Right? So it's got two can caps on the chassis. They've been reused. I've added a choke. It's all brand new pots in this thing, brand new jacks, all the switching at the back, impedance, speaker jacks, everything is all new because all the guts of it were ripped out. So the video is really in 2 parts, right? We're going to go through the tones that this amp can push out now, and then the second half of the video, it's really just a set of clips that I've taken at the bench, showing how I gutted this thing and how I rebuilt it with one of my MIDI PCBs. So just to describe what this amp's capable of now, it's a 2-channel amp, just like the 900s are, and you can see it's foot switch controllable, right? So I've got just a standard Marshall replacement 2-button foot switch here into the foot switch jack, as you'd expect. It's 2-button because we've got a channel selection here, which goes between the gain channel and the Plexi channel. So channel 1 is Plexi, channel 2 is a gain stage in front of the Plexi, right? So kind of José style gain structure there. The second button is a boost, right? So this is basically a boost or a cathode boost on the second gain stage in the amp. And so, you've got kind of 4 modes, if you like, right? So the boost is available on both the Plexi channel and the gain channel. And in the very intro, play in a riff from Chili Peppers with the boost off, right? So that's kind of the cleanest the amp will be in terms of setup. And I had the gain on channel 1 at about 2 p.m, maybe 3 p.m, around there, right? So a bit of gain on there, but it's just a really nice edge of break up there, right? The second part of the clip was with the cathode boost on, and so you get, it's just a bit more bite, bit more grind there, right? Shared tone stack through here, and 2 master volumes, right? So we've got, this is the gain for the Plexi channel, this is the gain for the gain channel, or the, let's call it the José channel. 2 master volumes, right? A master for each channel. And on the JCM900, of course, it's got reverb tank. There's no reverb tank on this amp, right? The reverb, the tank is still in the head shell, but it's not connected, right? It's been completely ripped out. So what I've done with these 2 reverb pots here is to implement fully controllable power amp setup. So the first reverb pot here on the master for channel B is a response pot, or variable negative feedback. Okay. The second reverb is variable depth. All right, so we've got variable negative feedback, variable depth, and presence. Right, so you've got a fully controllable power stage or power amp setup in this thing. It's fantastic, right? It's really great to dial in tones that way. On the rear of the amp, we've put in one of our high voltage Metro style effects loops, so proper fully transparent effects loop in this amp. Now it works fantastically. Three-way impedance selector, speaker jacks. So there were a bunch of holes on the back of the amp that I wanted to reuse, so we put in a variable line out, which if you want to slab off the amp, do wet dry wet setup, or maybe after a recording interface to put an IR on afterwards. All of that's now possible with the amp. This was quite a complex build. Certainly wouldn't recommend it for a novice, but it just kind of shows, I guess, what's possible with a bit of thinking. Using one of these PCBs, you can really shoehorn it into an amp like this and completely transform it. There's been a bunch of guys on my DIY builders group on Facebook that have done similar things, right? Bought PCBs off me and actually thrown them into older amp chassis, either combos or heads, and produced stellar results, completely transforming the amp that they've had, and reusing a bunch of components in there, particularly around transformers, right? They're expensive things. Don't let your old amp sit there. Think about how you might be able to modernise it and use it. It's good fun.
All right, so the JCM900, here we go. 2 PCBs, lots of solid state chips here through the preamp section. You know, here's the here's my partially populated mini board, right? This is the thing we're going to throw in here. This is going to come out completely. Jury's out on this. I'll probably pull this out as well and just wire directly to new jacks on the rear of the amp. I can't see the point of keeping that, to be honest, but we'll see. That's going to go in there. Okay. So I've measured the plate voltage on this. It's 473 volts. It's quite healthy. I'll reuse these can caps here. Okay, so I won't have to place caps on the board here. Other than that, we're just going to rip this out and get into it. Right, so that didn't take too long. With the help of my desoldering gun, got all these off. So I've preserved the length of all of these because I want to reuse all this wire as much as possible, right? Including all the power section. Yeah, you know, starting clean like this is the way to go, I reckon. JCM900s don't have a choke. Okay, so we will be adding a choke to this amp as well. The only small, let's call it pain in the ass, that I have discovered once I started pulling this apart is the front of the chassis here. If you can see that, it's got these raised mounts here, which is where the front PCB was mounted. These raised parts of the chassis here. Bit of a nightmare. However, I have kind of tested it with a spare pot that I've got, or an old pot, I should say. And I think with a washer spacing it out and turned, I'll be able to mount those nice and perpendicular without having to worry too much about those. So from here, what am I going to do? Right, I'm going to drill out the chassis for the mounts for this board, the standoffs. All right, so progress update. Pulling those old PCBs out and desoldering it was easy. This has been somewhat more labor intensive, right? So let's just go through it. First off, I talked about how the chassis had these mounts here, right? Which was a bit of a pain for the pots. I got around it by using some spacers for the pots to bring them out from the from the chassis edge. So they're all in there nice and flush now. So that took a bit of kind of figuring out. What we're going to have is, this is going to be a 2-channel amp, right? So it's going to have like a Plexi style channel here, and a modded Marshall, kind of BE style channel on gain 2. It's kind of like the small box setup. Treble, middle, bass. Now, presence, obviously. And here, these 900s, right? Dual reverb. So master volume for channel 1 here, master volume for channel 2 here. There's no reverb in this amp anymore. So what I'm going to use these 2 pot spaces here for, or what I have used these 2 pot spaces here for, is a variable negative feedback or response and a depth, right? So we've got all the power amp controls on the front of the amp here, negative feedback, depth and presence. Okay, so that's all cool. Push pulls on the 2 gains, because that'll be controlling the cathode boost on the second gain stage, the bypass cap on one of these, and the other one will activate the Xena clipping on my mini board. We're using the mini board in this amp, right? What else? Right, so I put an impedance selector in, 2 speaker jacks, this is all new, wired the output transformer into those, two regular fuses here. This is the mains fuse, HT fuse here. I've reused the IEC power connector, desoldered off the PCB, and because it was actually separately mounted with the screws, that was easy. Into the power supply here, I have reconfigured these CAN capacitors here, and so on the mains we're going to have 250s bridged, so it'll be 100 microfarad mains, and then 50 aside is going to be screens and phase inverter, and then I'll get to the PC board in a second. Here is my rectifier, right? Full bridge rectifier for this PT. So this is the old, rectifier just bolted in on through the chassis. So drilled there. I've drilled my standoffs in here as well. Here's one. Another one here. Another one here's under this input jack. So I'll just pull that input jack out to mount the board. It's a tight fit, but we can make it work. And finally, what's coming through here is the choke. So I've added a choke, and that's mounted to these 4 bolts here. When I flip the chassis over, we will see what that is going to look like. What else have I done? Okay, here. Now this is the 800 sets up a plus 15 and minus 15 volt DC supply for all of the solid state rubbish that's on that PC board. So here I'm just tapping in, I'm using one side of this, and I'm going to, from this I'll get rectified AC to power 12 volt relays which are on my board. This will be the foot switch jack here, and I will put a switch in this hole here to switch between the 2 channels. Yeah, we are getting close. So let's have a look at this quickly, right? Here is my mini board. It's only partially populated. It's pre-wired. Bit of a mess at the moment, right? But I'm just going to do as much of this as I can before I put it in here, because once it goes in, it's going to be pretty tight fit. I've only used the parts of the board that I need to, right? So there's no clean channel on this. This is a 3-channel board, simple clean channel 1. I'm not using it. Right? We're using channel 2 and channel 3 as the Plexi mode and the the BE style mode. For the small box, no phase inverter cap because I'm using ones on the chassis. No screens, no mains. This supports cathode bias power tubes. I'm not using any of that, right? It's going into fixed bias mode. And lastly, I have followed the JCM900 setup for the bias, right? So this is a non-center tapped high voltage secondary on the power transformer, but it doesn't have a separate bias wind on these 900s, right? These standard PTs. So in the 900, they tap off one side of that HT wind, similar to say a 2204 or a 1987X, but because it's not center tap, you need to do it a special way. And I will post a picture of how you do that. Okay, you got to be crazy to do this, but I did it. Look, it's not that bad. It's just, it's quite a lot of work, right? This is basically like building an amp from scratch. The advantage of using this 900 donor, I guess, is that, hey, transformers are in. I've got some capacitors I can use. Power supply is kind of wired up. All of these pots were, let's call it 3/4 wired. I had to, work on them a little bit. You can see I've moved the screen resistors from, I actually reused the screen resistors from the JCM900 PCB itself. It's a tight fit, but it's possible. This is our mini board, and you can see, right, that it's sailing pretty close to the wind here, but there is enough of a gap. It's not actually touching any of the tube sockets, and I've got it just slightly angled like that. So here you can see I've got space here. Got my chopstick in front of the PCB here, quite spacious. Well, and then down here it's tighter, right? So that's getting much more closer to the edge of the chassis. as you can imagine, right, when I was testing how best to put this in, I had to consider a number of factors, not least of which the input jack sitting over the top of the PCB here. Thankfully, I'm not using any components here, but it would still be okay there actually. I'm not using any of the capacitors here, right? So you can see the pots would inhibit that because I'm using these here. I moved this filter cap here, which is for the DC supply for the relay. I put it up here instead because I'm not using that position in the board, so I could just kind of, you know, reuse it. This is my channel switch here, and foot switch jack, which has channel switching and the cathode boost function. So yeah, look, all that's left to do, I have actually, you know, powered the amp up and troubleshooted it. I had, you know, a couple of little teething problems to sort out, mainly to do with the switching, and also had a little bit of hum that was being coupled into one of the wire runs that I had. So I tidied all that up with shielded cable, and now it's very, very quiet. Always pays just shielded cable for anything that is of any great length in your amp. Just switching wise, I am using channel 2 and channel 3 from the Mini, so I'm not using the simple clean channel. You can see it's not populated here. And I've got channel 2, which is channel 1 in this amp, set as in the Plexi mode. And I've got channel 2 set up in you know, the 3 gain stage plus cathode follower gain mode. And I've got it set up with the switching so that when I flick the amp between the channels, it automatically flicks the PCB into Plexi mode for channel 1 and out of Plexi mode for channel 2. And then 2 gains, 2 masters, right? So the gains are here, channel 1, channel 2, and the volumes are here. These are push-pull pots because I've got this set up to switch the bypass cap on the second gain stage for the amp, and here we have got these, you know, the diode clipping, right? Yeah, let's call it the SAT switch, right? But wired using my hybrid technique. So I'm just finalizing the loop install. So it's kind of similar install that we use with the Origin 20 mod, where the jacks are off the loop board. And I've done this a few times, right? The 1987X mod that I did on the channel, same thing, right? So our effects loop board is standard Marshall spacing. 1.5 inch is between the send and return. This is a different spacing on the chassis here, right? So the jacks come off, you wire them just with little fly leads to and from. You can see this R8 is the drop-in resistor on my board, and you want to adjust this. It's 36k there at the moment, 2-watt resistor. So you get 300 volts DC on this side, which is the loop side. This side is the phase inverter supply, which is coming from this orange lead here, which comes from the PI label on the PCB. I've got to play with the voltages here a little bit. I've got a 22k dropper here, which is from the screen supply to the phase inverter supply. It's dropping too much at the moment. I'm going to lower this probably to 15k, and that will give me a little bit more voltage through the preamp. It's a little bit low at the moment from what I'm looking for. So we'll do that. I will equalize the loop. I've got a switch here to switch the loop in and out, so I can get I'll use the oscilloscope to get the volumes the same, and we are done. Okay, so just to fine tune the voltages in this amp, I'll just show you the process I go through. The main thing to focus on here is the first drop-in resistor, right? So this is this 22k I've got here at the moment, 2-watt resistor. This is the dropping the B plus supply string from screens to phase inverter supply. And if you can see on one side of this, we've got 472 volts, that's screen supply. Okay, the other side, which is the phase inverter, got just over 300. Now, I really want that to be, 320, 325, because I'm targeting, can't see what I'm touching here, but I'm going over to V1A, the plate voltage on V1. It's 117. Now, in this type of, 3 gain stage cathode follower style circuit, I want that to be about 140. 135 to 145 is the sweet spot, I think. So I'm going to need to increase this phase inverter supply by about 20 to 25 volts, and then it'll cascade through the rest of the preamp. All right, I think this is pretty much bang on now, right? I ended up putting it's 15k there, it's a 10k and a 5.1 in series, and I'll just take you through the voltage readings on the amp so you can see where we ended up. Now, main supply, I'm going to get this. I've got my variac here, right? So I'm just going to adjust this. Let's get it bang on 240. Here we go. Close enough, right? Let's move to DC. This is our rectified, this is our B plus at the filter. Okay, 472 on the plates. Okay, on the screen pin. While we're here, I'll show you the negative bias DC voltage on the grid, minus 47. And here's our bias current actually. So that's 2 tubes through a 1 ohm resistor, right? So, 76 milliamps, you can divide that by 2. Same here. So on this side here, it's about 35 milliamps per tube, right? This is the screen supply node here. This is the phase inverter supply. So you can see we've got that up at 430 now. 340. It was just over 300 before I made that adjustment, right, and reduced that drop-in resistor. This one here, screen supply, was 22. We're now at 15. Okay. So here is our phase inverter supply again, and that 10k dropper, and this is the supply for the rest of the preamp. Now, if we look at our plate voltages and cathode voltages on the first few on through the preamp here, right? So V1A 135. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, we'll do a tone test, obviously, but this was pretty low before, so now we're in that kind of region that I was looking for. This is the cathode voltage on that stage. Okay, here's the plate on V1B, and here's the cathode V1B. If we go to the third gain stage, here is the plate supply for V2A, I'm not talking about. Here's the cathode, right? That's with the 820 ohm resistor on that cathode there. And plate supply, this is the cathode follower stage now. Bang on 300, right? And here is the voltage at the top of the 100k resistor on the cathode follower. Okay, so they all look really great. I'm pretty happy with that. Regarding the loop, we're feeding this from the phase inverter supply, so it's getting 343 right on that side, and we've got a voltage drop across that, so we're at 291, which is pretty sweet, right? Anywhere kind of 280 to 310 You go a little bit over 300 if you like, is the operating range you want there. I always aim for 300, but you know, give or take, right? So I think the amp's done.
So that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do, and ring the bell to be notified with new content. Cheers.